What happened here? Whoa. There we go. Okay. Okay, here we are. I just have to mute people again. Okay, I hope everyone is muted now. Oh. Okay. Now, someone's still not muted, and for some reason, okay, it's the best I could do. Okay. Okay, welcome everyone to the life and teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. This week it's a very, very important class because this Shabbat is the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov. It's called Chai Elul, the 18th day of Elul. And we're going to dedicate our learning tonight to understanding the significance of this day in general, very, very specifically how it affected and influenced and played itself out in the life of the Baal Shem Tov. And then we're going to see even more primordial meaning to this date and some consequences of understanding Chai Elul. So instead of starting with the Baal Shem Tov, we're going to start with an event that is approximately 170 years before the Baal Shem Tov, and that is the Maharal of Prague, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betzalel Lau, called the Maharal of Prague, passed away on Chai Elul. And the reason that's important is because when people look at the teachings of the Maharal, they see the antecedents, the roots of what later would be called Chassidut. In other words, the teachings and the books of the Maharal, in a great measure, paved the way for the type of thinking, type of Torah given over in Chassidut. And he passed away on Chai Elul. Rav Ginsburg has said many times that throughout different streams of Chassidut, they all see the Maharal played an incredibly important part in, as I use the expression, paving the way for a certain way of looking at the world, a certain way of looking at the Torah that later became part of Chassidut. So let's start and learn just a little bit about the Maharal. It's a very, very fascinating individual. He was born in 1525, and in those days he lived quite a long life. He lived into his mid-80s, And he was born in Poznan. And what's interesting is he only took his first rabbinic position when he was 39 years old. He was recognized as a genius, but he had not written any books, and he had not taken any rabbinic positions until he was 39, and he became chief rabbi of Moravia. And he held that position for approximately 19 years. And only then did he move to Prague. So he was nearly 50 years old, actually older. He was nearly 60 years old when he first went to Prague. Nonetheless, we refer to him as the Maharal of Prague. He was in Prague for approximately 12 years. He was not the chief rabbi of Prague, but everyone turned to him as like an elder. He wrote his first book in Prague. He was 66 years old. Now we have to understand that we have many, many, many books from the Maharal, but we'll call him a late bloomer. He wrote his first book, Gur Aryeh, which was his commentary on Rashi, on the Chumash, when he was 66 years old. He was in Prague for 12 years, and really for the same reason that he left Poznan, he left Prague, that the Maharal was very, let's call it, strong on maintaining Jewish law in a community. And when he saw different things that were happening that did not match his idea of how a community should operate according to Jewish law, he made sure that everyone knew. And so he had tremendous followers, but because he was very outspoken, there were many detractors. And not really about him per se, but because he didn't want to allow certain laxity in Jewish law. So after 12 years, he left Prague and he became chief rabbi of Poland. And he held that position for, I'm not sure exactly how long. And then he did go back to Prague, where in his 80s, he was finally made chief rabbi. One of the reasons he left after 12 years is at that point, he was ready to become chief rabbi. And they didn't approve it because there were certain, especially wealthy people who felt that they should be the power brokers. And the Maharal, as I said, was very outspoken. And so therefore, he was rejected to be the chief rabbi. And that's when he became chief rabbi of Poland. He eventually came back to Prague and he became chief rabbi and he lived there to his final days. So let's fill in a little bit though, that there's a famous story about his birth. And that story is his mother was ready to give birth, and it was Pesach night. It was a Seder. And this is at the time where there were blood libels all over Europe with the idea that Jews would, God forbid, kill a Christian, usually a boy, and use that blood to make the matzah. That was the blood libel. It's outrageous. Nonetheless, thousands, if not more people, were killed because of these blood libels. It led to tremendous pogroms. Anyways, the story is told that at the Seder, the Maharal's mother went into labor, but like contractions coming very, very quickly, and so everyone was like the birthing coaches were not there, and so what happened is a whole retinue of people ran out of the house in order to find to get to the midwife. As this stream of people is running down the street, and there's a huge commotion, they right then there was a Christian man who probably by mistake had killed his own son. He was reprimanding him, and he beating him, and he actually died. And so he put the body in a bag, and he was planning on taking it to the Maharal's house. Well, he wasn't born yet, to the house of the Maharal, and then go to the police and say, I have evidence that they killed a Christian boy, and they used the blood in the matzah for Pesach. But when this person saw these people running down the street, he thought they were running like to report him. And so he panicked, and he dropped the body and he ran. The people saw this, and there was a policeman right there. They reported it, and this man was caught. And it was considered that saved all of Prague from a horrible blood libel. And so the Maharal of Prague was born with this energy. And he became known as like a defender of Israel. And from this comes what many people who don't know anything about the Maharal, but they've heard of the golem that supposedly the Maharal made, a golem, which was he created from Kabbalah a body that could be controlled to protect the Jewish people. Now, the interesting thing is that the Maharal passed away in 1609. The first story that was published about the golem that the Maharal had made was in the 1850s, 250 years later. And then in the early 1900s, it became like famous stories and books all about the Maharal and the golem. Everyone attributes the idea of Frankenstein to the golem, but there's a lot of question about it. But what's interesting is the Maharal was a student of Kabbalah, and there are a number of statements by him, because this idea of creating a golem is written about in the Talmud. And so it's considered that certain people, whoever is not muted, please mute yourself. I'd really appreciate it. I've tried to do it, and for some reason, it's not working from my side. So if people could please mute themselves. Thank you. So the Maharal writes about the possibility of making a golem. And he wrote that certain people on a certain spiritual level were capable of doing such a thing. So that obviously added like fuel to the stories that grew up. So I remember at the beginning of the series about the Baal Shem Tov, I think it was a quote from the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe, who said, and I'm not quoting exactly, but if everyone believes all the miracle stories of the Baal Shem Tov, they're a fool. And if you don't believe them, you are like a heretic. Meaning that we believe that in principle, the Baal Shem Tov probably could have done all of those miracles. But do we actually believe that he did all of those miracles? Not necessarily. So it's the same thing with the Maharal. In other words, it appears that he probably could have created a golem. Whether he did, we don't know exactly. Okay, there's so much more on the Maharal, but I want to get to the Baal Shem Tov, but I just want to mention just a few other things. The Alter Rebbe was a direct descendant of the Maharal. 7 generations. 7 generations after the Maharal was the Alter Rebbe, and we're going to see shortly that the Alter Rebbe was born on none other than Chai Elul. None other than Chai Elul. One other thing that I think a lot of you will be interested in, his wife was Peril, and she was considered a genius in her own right. And apparently, the Maharal would study with Peril, including the Talmud, and that she was very responsible for many of his books actually coming into being, because she helped with the organization, the filing, and according to one account, she even found mistakes in the writing of the Maharal, and she corrected them, or she alerted her husband that somehow some mistakes got in his writings and they were fixed. So here we see it's not only the expression, there's always a great woman behind every great man, but she was a great Talmid Chachama in her own right. Okay, now we'll go to the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov is born on Chai Elul. But we're going to see that this date repeats itself throughout his life. So it's not just that he's born on Chai Elul. There's an expression that on one's birthday, Hamazal Gover, one's mazal, and that's a very hard word to translate, but one's fate, one's destiny, one's innate soul powers are strengthened on one's birthday. But in the life of the Baal Shem Tov, it's very, very almost unique how many important things occurred to him on his birthday. So the first class or two, we told many, many stories about the Baal Shem Tov and his whole history. So we're not going to repeat that here, but I'm just going to concentrate what did happen on his various birthdays. So on his 16th birthday, the following occurred. But I just have to put in here that already at age 16, the Baal Shem Tov, who was a part of this somewhat secretive society of hidden tzaddikim, he was near leadership at 16. By the age of 18, he was one of the leaders of this group. In other words, it was recognized that he was a unique neshama, and he was tutored from the time he was approximately 8 years old by great neshamas, and he learned both the revealed Torah and the hidden Torah. So on his 16th birthday, he was at an inn, and he noticed that the innkeeper and his wife, they seemed to be very simple people, and they were constantly saying things like Baruch Hashem, or Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Voed. Blessed is the glory of the name of God forever and ever. And other short little sayings, but they would say it with great sincerity. With great sincerity. The Baal Shem Tov kind of like in his consciousness, like picked up on this. In the day, it was on his birthday, he went out to the fields like he usually did. And there he would daven and commune with God and meditate and learn. This was his practice from the time he was a little boy. In the field, Eliyahu Navi comes to him. And this was the first time that Eliyahu Navi revealed himself to the Baal Shem Tov. It's recorded that the Baal Shem Tov was with other people of this hidden society when Eliyahu would come, but he had never appeared to him alone. And Eliyahu Navi said to him, he said, did you notice the innkeeper and his wife? Did you notice what they were saying and how they said it? So he said to the Baal Shem Tov, he said, here you are working very, very hard to be davening according to the unifications, the yichudim of the Arizal. But I have to tell you that the simple, sincere words of the innkeeper and his wife in heaven equal just as much as the greatest Kabbalists and the greatest Kabbalistic unifications. And this was like a crossroads in the Baal Shem Tov's life. It was from that meeting on his 16th birthday that he came to have an appreciation for what's called the simple Jews, which became a main teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. The idea that every Jew has accessibility to God. Every Jew is holy. Every Jew is equal in God's eyes. Because remember, we learned that at that time there was a bit of a division in Jewish society between the educated elite and those who were less educated. It was almost like two societies. And the Baal Shem Tov, with the urging of Eliyahu Navi, began to see through this. And it's said that from that day on, the Baal Shem also didn't mean that he never prayed again with the Yehudim of the Arizal. But apparently from that point on, he definitely adopted this idea that even just simple praying to God by opening your heart, your soul, your mind, attaching yourself to the words of the tefillah, could do as much in the upper worlds as all of the yichudim of the Arizal. So that was his 16th birthday, and it really changed his life. On his 26th birthday, 10 years later, I should mention, during those 10 years, Eliyahu Navi would appear to him all the time and teach him and reveal things to him and send him to different places so he could learn different lessons. So that went on for 10 years. On his 26th birthday, Chai Elul, the Baal Shem Tov had a dream. And he dreamt that a man who he didn't recognize came to him and said, tomorrow, I want you to go to the mikveh. And he gave him some, speaking about Yehudim, some kavanot to say. And I will meet you in a cave between two mountains that he explained to him. The Baal Shem Tov woke up and wasn't sure what to make of this, but he didn't consider it like something that he had to do. The next night, he had the same dream. And this time, he took it seriously. And this man said not to tell anyone about this meeting that we're going to have. And to make a long story short, the Baal Shem went to the mikveh. He went to these designated mountains. He found the cave. And there he met Achia Hashiloni. Achia Hashiloni was the teacher of Eliyahu Navi. It's written about in the book of Kings. And here his soul comes to the Baal Shem Tov and becomes his main teacher for the next 10 years. And he told him not to tell anyone about this. Later, it was revealed, and he learned with the Baal Shem Tov for the next 10 years. They began the Chumash at the first verse, Bereshit bara Elokim et Hashemayim va'aretz, and they learned it according to many, 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 many different levels for 10 years. And Achia Hashiloni also instructed the Baal Shem Tov in different ideas, different attitudes, different ways of serving God. On his 36th birthday, they finished the Chumash. He got to the last verse, and Achia Hashiloni said to the Baal Shem Tov, now it is time for you to reveal yourself. For those who remember, until this point, the Baal Shem Tov was a hidden tzaddik. He would go from place to place, and certain people would understand that he was a great neshama. As soon as people would realize that, he would leave. So he remained almost, I'll call it 99% hidden. On his 36th birthday, Chai Elul, Achia Hashiloni told him it's time to reveal yourself. To make a long story short, the Baal Shem Tov did not want to reveal himself. He felt it was almost a punishment. He felt that his service of God was between him and God. He was acting very, very strongly in this society of hidden tzaddikim. So they were doing acts of goodness all over the place, but it was done in a hidden way. And Achia Shiloni said, no, it's time to reveal yourself. It's not a punishment. It's why you came into this world. And so apparently it took a few months for the Baal Shem Tov to come to terms. And according to one account, he revealed to his wife that he was being instructed from heaven to reveal himself. And they fasted for 3 days in order to get clarity. And after 3 days, the Baal Shem Tov understood that this was his destiny. And then he did reveal himself. So without going into all kinds of other stories, the whole point here is this day formulated the being that we call the Baal Shem Tov, from his birth to his 16th birthday when Eliyahu Navi revealed himself to him, to his 26th birthday when Achia Shiloni revealed himself, to his revealing himself to the whole world. Okay, now, when the Baal Shem Tov is 46 years old, everyone detected that he became very, very happy that year. He was just very, very upbeat, very optimistic, full of life and energy. And he started to say that a new soul is about to be born in Israel. And he will be a great, great neshama. And so the account is there was a couple who were married for a year, and the wife had not conceived. Not unusual, but they really wanted to start a family. And so they were followers of the Baal Shem Tov. So they went to the Baal Shem Tov and asked for a blessing. And he gave them a blessing to have a son. They left, and sure enough, very soon afterwards, she became pregnant. And she said to her husband, it seems that this is coming from the blessing of the Baal Shem Tov. You should go back to him and tell him that I'm pregnant. And he did. And then the Baal Shem Tov put one and one together, and he understood that this new neshama that he could feel it in the air with his prophetic powers was this baby who was going to be born. And so he instructed the father that he was going to have a very, very special neshama. And very strangely, he told him, don't tell anyone that your wife is pregnant, and don't tell anyone that you got a bracha from me. And when the baby is born, don't ever mention my name to him. So it seemed a little strange. Anyways, on the Baal Shem Tov's 47th birthday, on Chai Elul, he was in the midst of teaching, and all of a sudden he stopped, even though this birth was happening relatively far away. he stopped and he said, a new soul has just been born who will, I don't remember exactly how he described it, but who will bring great, great light to Israel. And he was very, very happy. It was very joyous. And that was on his 47th birthday. So another major occurrence happens. The parents did as the Baal Shem Tov said, but right before his third birthday, the father comes back and asks, could we bring this child to you for you to, give him the haircut for his upshirin on his third birthday? And the Baal Shem Tov agreed, and they brought, this was the Alter Rebbe, I should have mentioned that. That is the soul who was born, the Alter Rebbe. As I mentioned before, he himself was born in Chai Elul. So they bring him to the Baal Shem Tov on his third birthday, which is Chai Elul, and the Baal Shem Tov gave him many, many brachas, and he, again, in private, told the father, do not mention me to your son. Don't teach him anything about Chassidut, because he has to come to it of his own. He can't grow up with it. He'll have to come to it on his own, which is exactly what happened to the Alter Rebbe. And he gave the little boy blessings. He cut his hair, and they left. The Alter Rebbe, even the Baal Shem Tov, lived another 13 years, never saw him again. But when they left, the little boy asked his parents, who was that man who gave me blessings and cut my hair? And they said, that's your Zaidi. That's your Zaidi. And it was only when the Alter Rebbe was around 18 did he first go to the Maggid of Mezrich, and on his own he adopted Hasidut. But the rest of his life, any time that he would quote the Baal Shem Tov or talk about the Baal Shem Tov, he would call him Zaidi. He would come, because then he understood who that man was, but it took many years. And for whatever reason, the Baal Shem Tov felt that he had to come to Hasidut on his own, without being brought up that way and just adopting the ways of Hasidut without thinking about them. Okay, so now we've gone through the Maharal passed away in Chai Elul. We went through all of the significant dates of Chai Elul in the Baal Shem Tov's life. The Alter Rebbe is born on Chai Elul. But now there's something far more primordial that happened on Chai Elul. And this will be really, in a certain way, the secret of this date. We know that Rosh Hashanah, according to tradition, is the 6th day of creation. Even though we call it the New Year, and if you wouldn't know that fact, you would assume that the 1st of Tishrei is the 1st day of creation. But according to tradition, it's the 6th day of creation. It's the day that Adam and Chava are created. It's also the day that they ate from Eitz Hadat Tov V'Ra, and they were judged to have to leave the Garden of Eden. That's part of the deeper understanding of Rosh Hashanah is Yom Hadin. the day of judgment, because in a very primordial sense, it was the judgment of Adam and Chava, which affected all of humanity till this day. So when does creation start? According to this paradigm, Chav Hei Elul, the 25th day of Elul. That is the first day of creation. Well, by the time we get to Rosh Hashanah, it's the 6th day of creation. So the Arizal revealed, and it was especially written about in Rabbi Shalom Sharabi, who was a great Kabbalist in the mid-1700s. He came to Israel and he set up a yeshiva that still exists. It was called the Beit El Yeshiva. It was a Kabbalistic yeshiva where they learned Kabbalah. Many people consider he was called the Rashash, Rabbi Shlomo Sharavi. It's called the Rashash, that he was a Gilgul of the Arizal, because his writings really took the teachings of the Arizal and polished them and explained them. And he trained a whole generation in the secrets of the Arizal. He lived approximately 200 years after the Arizal. But as I said, many people consider him a Gilgul. So he revealed an incredible thing. If the first day of creation is Chav Hei Elul, now we have to understand that we're talking in somewhat symbolic terms here. So if the first day of creation is Chav Hei Elul, that's Olam HaTikun. That's our world. Well, what about Olam HaTohu? What about the previous world, which was called Olam HaTohu, the world of chaos? When was that created? So if you go back 7 days from Chai Elul, from Chav Hei Elul, you get to Chai Elul. Chai Elul, according to the Arizal and the Rashash, is the creation of Olam HaTohu. Now, what have we learned about Olam HaTohu? This is the world that shattered. When the lights were so great, the initial immature vessels of creation could not hold the light, and they shattered. And the shattered shards of the previous world becomes the elements, becomes the matter, the stuff of this world, Olam HaTikun, which means the world of rectification. We are fixing what happened in the breaking of the vessels. But Chai Elul is the beginning of Olam HaTohu. The Arizal and the Rashash went even further, that the 11th of Elul is the world of Akudim. This is a world where there's only one light and one vessel. By Olam HaTohu already there are 10 vessels. The vessels are the Sfirot. But the word Akudim is the same word as Akedat Yitzchak. It means the binding of Yitzchak. In that world, light and vessel were bound together. There was really no difference. And so that was on the 11th of Elul. They go back even more primordial. A week before that is the 4th of Elul. That is Adam Kadmon. Adam Kadmon is from the 4th of Elul. Okay, I'm not going to go into this more. We're going to go back now to Chai Elul. So Chai Elul, we know that each day of creation relates to one of the Sfirot. Just like the first day of creation is Chesed. The second day of creation is Gevura. The third is Tiferet, and so forth. And actually, when you make those comparisons, it's actually startling how well it works together. Like why the first day is connected to Chesed. Why is the second day connected to Gevura, etc. So in Olam HaTohu, the 18th of Elul is Chesed. And here we can see the antecedents to Chasidut. Chasidut comes from the word Chesed. So here we see that the Baal Shem Tov is born on Chai Elul, which is Chesed of the world of Tohu. And that's why the light of the Baal Shem Tov, not everyone could handle it. By the end of his life, the opponents of Hasidut had put the Baal Shem Tov and the whole movement into cherem, had excommunicated them. And this is so, it's like typical of Olam HaTohu, that the lights were so great and pure and holy. Many of the vessels of that era could not handle it. It could not handle it. So this is a very deep understanding of Chai Elul and its connection to the Maharal, to the Baal Shem Tov, to the Alter Rebbe, that the whole movement of Hasidut is coming through these individuals, and they are rooted in Chai Elul in a much more primordial manner. Okay, now in 1746, when the Baal Shem Tov was 48 years old, he had an Aliyat Neshama on Rosh Hashanah. And that is the well-known story of, in this elevation of soul, he found himself in the presence of the soul of the Mashiach. And he asked him, Master, when are you coming? And the Mashiach responded with a verse, Vayafutzu mayanatecha chutza, when the well springs of your teachings reach the farthest limit. In other words, remember, this is 12 years after the Baal Shem Tov had revealed himself. But the Mashiach was putting his coming back on the Baal Shem Tov, meaning this movement that you're starting, these teachings that you're revealing, the training that you're giving to your students, this is what will bring Mashiach. And only when these teachings reach their farthest reaches, that will pave the way for my coming. Now, I'm mentioning this because we're told, and we're going to see the connection in 1 minute, when we look at the soul of the Baal Shem Tov, so there were a number of different components. One of the components was a new soul, just like the Alter Rebbe had a component of his soul that was a new soul. The Baal Shem Tov was a new soul that had never been incarnated before in this world. According to various traditions, he also had an element of Rabbi Sadia Gaon, a great sage who had lived approximately 1700 years before the Baal Shem Tov in Babylonia. Another component was a hidden tzaddik from the city of Tzvat. I'm not going into all the explanations now, but another component of the soul of the Baal Shem Tov was the nefesh of David HaMelech. And this is key to understanding why the Baal Shem Tov wanted to meet the Orach Chaim. I believe we've told the story already, but there was a great tzaddik from Morocco, the Orach Chaim, Rabbi Chaim ben Attar, who came to Israel, and the Baal Shem Tov felt that if he could get together with the Orach Chaim, he felt the Orach Chaim was the ruach of David HaMelech. If they could get together, they could bring Mashiach. It didn't happen. The Baal Shem Tov tried to make it to Israel. He made it as far as Istanbul. On the boat from Istanbul, the boat was hijacked, pirated, and he never made it. The Orach Chaim passed away in that year. So I'm mentioning this because we've now mentioned this idea of the 18th of Elul is the beginning of Olam HaTohu. Well, there's a very, very important event that happened on the 24th of Elul. And that is when David went up on the roof and he saw Bathsheba, and we'll call it, he took her prematurely. He saw in Ruach HaKodesh that she was his soulmate, as the sages said, Misheshet Yemei Bereshit, from the 6 days of creation. But he didn't have the patience to wait to when he could come together with her in a more, call it kosher way. So what is the significance of that? The 24th of Elul is Malchut of Olam HaTohu. And this is the source of David. David became Melech. But his great sin, his great fall, happened on the 24th of Elul. But here it's still very connected to the Baal Shem Tov. Now there's the Baal Shem Tov is Chesed of Olam HaTohu. And David wasn't born then, but maybe the most critical day of his life, for which he did tshuva for the rest of his life, and so many of the inspiration of the Psalms comes from the tshuva that he did for taking Bathsheba when he did. Malchut is always associated with prayer. And remember, it's David HaMelech who says, Va'ani tefillah, I am prayer. And so many of his prayers come from that experience of his doing tshuva for what happened on the 24th of Elul. Not completely, just like the Baal Shem Tov. Just like the Baal Shem Tov went out in the fields from the time he was a little boy, David HaMelech was out in the field with the sheep from the time he was a little boy. There's so many connections between the Baal Shem Tov and David HaMelech. But here we see in the dates, the Chai Elul and Chaf Daled Elul is tying them together. Now, of course, it's also connected to Mashiach. is the Mashiach is the one that says to the Baal Shem Tov, when your teachings reach their farthest reaches, and of course Mashiach is Mashiach ben David. Now to add something also highly significant, the Baal Shem Tov dies in the same day as the David Melech on Shavuos. They weren't born on the same day, but they die in the same day. So here, for those who have been following the strands that are connecting through this day, Chai Elul, are quite astounding. On Sukkot, we add to our grace after meals, to our benching. Harachaman hu yakim et Sukkot David hanofelet. Haracha, O merciful one, please raise up the fallen sukkah of David. What is the fallen sukkah of David? Remember, David represents Malchut. And the fallen sukkah of Malchut, this is really in the first Torah of Rabbi Nachman, Likutei Maran, how Malchut and Chen are in exile. In other words, the fallen sukkah of David is the fallen temple, which was David's vision. His son built it, but it was his vision to build a temple to God. And in fact, he began the plans of building the temple. And it was left to Shlomo HaMelech, Solomon, to finish the temple. But in a certain way, we could see it, it's the Baal Shem Tov who is lifting up the fallen sukkah of David, because he's connected to the soul of David. He's connected to the soul of Mashiach. And when the Baal Shem Tov was born, as we've discussed, the situation in the Jewish world was desperately critical. It was like the end of the end, the bottom of the bottom. People were just without hope, without encouragement, without knowing the next day if there's going to be a pogrom or not. Just everyone's life was just hanging in the balance. And the Baal Shem Tov came on the scene with a whole new message, a whole new spirit. And in a certain way began, that's what the Mashiach says, when your wellspring spread to the furthest reaches, that's symbolically raising the fallen sukkah of David. Now, I just want to bring it up to kind of like the current day. And that is, we have to mention the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The last, let's say, 10 years of his life was urging everyone, Mashiach now. We want Mashiach now. It's not clear. It's not clear if by the Rebbe or the Hasidim that they knew that the song that they put it to was Reb Shlomo's. We want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we want Mashiach now, we don't want to wait. It's one of Reb Shlomo's nigunim. Anyways, no, actually not that one. We want Mashiach, we want Mashiach, we want Mashiach, we want Mashiach now. We want Mashiach, we want Mashiach. So that's Reb Shlomo's Mikimi Me'afar Dal. Lift me up from the dust of the ground. That's lifting up Sukkot David Anofelet. So the Rebbe was trying to put in our consciousness that not only is all the prophecies being fulfilled and Mashiach's getting closer, but our role in making that happen. In other words, it's not just on the Baal Shem Tov that when his teachings reach the limit, everyone has to take responsibility and do what they can to try to bring Mashiach. That was the message of the Rebbe. And I'm sure you'll remember, and this will end, that on the 28th of Nisan, when the Rebbe made at least in Chabad, a earth-shaking proclamation, where the Rebbe said, I've done everything that I can do to bring Mashiach. The rest is in your hands. And he kind of took the mantle of responsibility and put it on everyone. I believe it wasn't that much longer, maybe within the year that he had his first stroke. And he was never the same afterwards, but he had already put the yoke of responsibility on each and every person. And at that same 28th of Nisan, he said, one thing I can tell you of how to bring Mashiach is to take orot de tohu, bekelim de tikkun, to take the lights of the world of tohu and create the proper vessels that can hold that light. When we can do that, then Mashiach can come. And so that really ties together, because here, again, as a review, we went through all the dates of Chai Elo, the passing away of the Maharal, the birth of the Baal Shem Tov, Eliyahu Navi coming to the Baal Shem Tov on his 16th birthday, Achia Hashiloni coming to the Baal Shem Tov on his 26th birthday, Achia Shiloni telling the Baal Shem Tov that he has to reveal himself on his 36th birthday. On his 47th birthday, the Alter Rebbe is born. So we went through that, but then we went back and saw a much more primordial understanding of Chai Elo. We connected it to the 24th of Elul, to David HaMelech. And the whole idea, though, is the Baal Shem Tov brought the lights of Tohu into the world. And we have to continue that. This is what it says in the Zohar, that on the merit of learning the secrets of the Zohar, Mashiach will come berachamim, will come in compassion. And this most certainly is the incentive behind Rav Ginsburg's teaching for all these years, Kabbalah and Hasidut, is that is considered, that is what we can do, is to bring these teachings into the world. The teachings are full of light, and they're full of the lights of Tohu, and we are responsible to make the proper vessels in order that these lights can help bring the Mashiach. So just everyone, a reminder, this Shabbos is Chai Elo. The Shabbos is Chai Elo, and so everyone try to remember these teachings and connect to them in a very deep way. And we should all merit to make the proper vessels for Mashiach to come.